in session, I have conferred with the lawyers in chambers with regard to the motion for mistrial that's on before the court now, made by the defendant. To the court's recollection, the audible reaction from the audience, and I'm not a finder of fact on this, but came from the mother of the deceased. Understandably so. It is clear to the court that there was no intention, bad faith, or any effort by the state to have this exhibit displayed or this photograph displayed to the jury. It was completely inadvertent and an error. There could be an argument made that such photograph would be admissible in evidence, but it had not been offered into evidence. There had been no foundation laid for it, and had not been disclosed to the defendant that it would be offered into evidence. I'm sure it was disclosed in discovery, but not presented to the defense counsel as the exhibits coming. And the court had previewed exhibits 50 through 57 that the state intended to offer at that time, and had offered at that time, and beginning to display them on the courtroom projection screen to the jury. The subject photograph was inadvertently displayed. The projection screen is directly across the entire courtroom from the jury box. It is on the opposing wall, that is the wall across from the jury box. It is, of course, the state's counsel table is closer to the jury box, and defense counsel is there, closer to the projection screen. The court does rule that after the display was taken down immediately, that there was, for lack of a better term, an index of on the projection screen of a computer screen that shows other documents or files or folders, whatever digital storage format you'd call it, that in the lower left-hand corner on the projection screen there was a small depiction of the same photograph, but the court sits closer to that screen right now, and did at that time, than the jury box is, and the court could not distinguish anything that would be visible to identify the contents of such a photograph in that small display. The court then walked over in front of the jury box as well, and including getting in front of juror seat number 12, which would be the closest one to the projection screen, and could not distinguish anything about that photograph. When I say that, I'm referring to the little box at the bottom left-hand portion of the screen when the rest of the index, or for lack of a better term, list of other items was on the screen. The court has discussed this matter with counsel and will now inquire of the jurors as to their ability to exclude such display from their consideration, and whether it will influence them in their decisions about this case in any way whatsoever. And then hear further arguments for and against motion for mistrial, and make a ruling thereon. So please bring the jury in. And the court directs that that digital image be available for part of the record for preservation, regardless of the outcome of the motion for mistrial.
Yes, sir.
I told you early on, sometimes there are matters that come up that need to be addressed by the court out of your presence. I've dealt with some matters in your absence right now, but I now have you back in the courtroom. And before you went out, while the previous witness was on the stand, as the state was beginning to display to you an exhibit from a group numbered 50 through 57, during the attempt to display one of those exhibits, a photograph was displayed on the projection screen. It is and was not one of the state's exhibits 50 through 57. It had not been offered into evidence. It had not been admitted into evidence. Nevertheless, it was displayed on the projection screen for a brief instant. Probably no more than a second, but I didn't have a stopwatch on it, of course. What I want to say to you is that display of that photograph is not evidence in this case, must not be considered by you evidence in this case. You will be asked shortly whether you will be able to exclude it from your consideration and not be influenced by it in any way whatsoever. Now, sometimes people talk about pretrial publicity and they say, can you forget something? I'm not asking if you can forget it. I'm not asking you if you can put it out of your mind, but I am asking you this. Are you able to and will you exclude from your consideration in this case and not be influenced in any way for any purpose what was displayed to you in that exhibit, in that photograph that was displayed that is not an exhibit and not evidence in this case? That is, can you set it completely aside from your consideration, not be influenced or affected by it in any way in making your decisions about this case? Juror number one, can you and will you do that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Excuse me, I'm going the wrong way. Juror number two, can you and will you do that?
I can, Your Honor.
Will you?
Yes, sir.
Juror number three?
Yes, I will, Your Honor.
Number four?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number five?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number six?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number seven?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number eight?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number nine?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 10?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 11?
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 12?
Yes, Your Honor.
Alternate number one?
Yes, Your Honor.
Alternate number two?
Yes.
I take it by those responses then that each juror, all 14 of you, can and will exclude it from your consideration, not be influenced by it in any way whatsoever, not be affected by it, not let it be a matter that you will consider in any way in deciding whether defendants are guilty or not guilty of any crime in this case. If that is still your position, please indicate so by raising your hand. Thank you. All 14 jurors raised a hand in response to the court's inquiry. Before we proceed further, I need you to step from the courtroom briefly. It won't be as long as last time. I'll have you back shortly. Please remember and follow my instructions, and do not discuss this proceeding among yourselves. As I've said, do not discuss the case in any way, even among yourselves, until you've been instructed to begin deliberations. Please step out. I'll have you back shortly. We're in the absence of the jury. I'd be glad to hear you further, Mr. Miles.
Thank you, Your Honor. And obviously appreciate the court's sensitivity to this, and I'll state for the record, I don't believe there was any ill intent on behalf of the state. I think it was a mistake, as the court indicated. But as I did indicate before, given what we have here and the kind of case we're talking about, and as we've discussed the probative value, I do, Your Honor, stick by my position and my motion for mistrial. I think that, and with all due respect, Your Honor, I think it was more than 1 second. And one other thing I'd like to put on the record is, as far as the jurors acknowledging actually what they saw, or if they saw it, that was not how it was presented to them. And I fully respect the court and how you addressed the issue. But as far as the record goes. So anyway, again, I would just say I don't think you can unring that bell. We don't know, with information before us, what exactly they saw and what impact it could have, and thank you for listening.
Mr. Waller?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I would ask that you deny the motion for the mistrial on several grounds. One, that while this photograph was not tendered as evidence, that there is an argument that could be made that it would be relevant in this case. That this case is about intoxication and about consumption of alcohol, and we've not hid the fact from the beginning that J.T. Taylor passed away as a result of this crash, and that his death was a result of intoxication. And you will hear shortly, I believe, that based on that crash and his death, that he was a .20 at the time of that crash and his death. So I would argue to you that it's relevant to prove exactly what we've been going about this whole trial, to prove that he was intoxicated at the time of the crash. I think it could also be used to show identity. We've gone throughout this trial identifying him as the young man with the blue bow tie in the photographs. Then that photograph would depict him as the young man with the blue bow tie. And finally, Your Honor, I believe there is case law in North Carolina that supports allowing photographs to be shown, such as this, to members of the jury, where it becomes an issue, and obviously it happens all the time in murder trials, where it becomes an issue is when the photographs are repetitive, and that is the current concern of the Court of Appeals. This was one photograph that was inadvertently shown, and I take full responsibility and apologize to the court and to the Taylor family for that occurring, but it was one photograph shown for a very, very, very brief period of time, was taken down immediately, and it was simply an error on behalf of the state. We've tried to take due care and caution to put the right photographs up, and we have found that just a couple got mislabeled, and we have corrected that error. So, Your Honor, I would ask that you deny the motion for the mistrial and allow this case to proceed to a conclusion.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
It appears to the court that the occurrence of what's been described as having taken place, that is, the inadvertent display of the subject photograph to the jury without same having been offered and admitted into evidence, as I said, was inadvertent, unintentional, not offered in bad faith, not performed or conducted in bad faith, and the defendant certainly does not suggest that as well. But it does not appear to the court that the occurrence has resulted in substantial and irreparable prejudice to the defendants, either of the defendants' case. The court concludes that each juror has asserted to the court and to the parties that he or she can and will exclude from consideration, not be influenced in any way by that occurrence. Therefore, the court denies the defendant's motion for mistrial. That's defendants plural, motion for mistrial, and the exceptions noted, preserved, and again, make it clear that that photograph must be maintained as a record for further review in the event such may be necessary.
We have deleted that photograph from our display for the rest of the photographs, but I do have a copy of it, and we'll present it to the court.
All right.
Upon adjournment.
Should we put a number on it or some way to identify it? I don't want it listed here because might end up showing it again some way or other. But Madam Clerk, it'll be, and since it was not admitted into evidence, it's only part of the record. It'll be sealed,
Yes, sir.
subject to being reopened upon order of the court. So we'll take care of that administratively. All right, bring the jury in. including what you just all asserted you can and will do. You may continue with direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I reapproach?
You may.
Identified several photographs to you from the crash scene, and if you'll review those photographs, States Exhibit 50 through 57, and let me know if you recognize those photographs.
Yes, sir.
And are those photographs from the crash scene, sir?
They are.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask to publish States Exhibits 50 through 57.
States Exhibits 50 through 57 may be published to the jury.
State's Exhibit number 50 is 2446566. Officer Manukas, earlier on in direct examination, you testified as to seeing tire marks there at the scene. Do you see those tire marks here, sir?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, can you describe for the members of the jury what you see there?
This is the path that JT's vehicle traveled on this night. If you look, you can see 4 different tire marks. What that indicates is the vehicle is sliding sideways as it's moving through the grass at this point in the series of events, because you're seeing 4 different tire marks as you go through there.
Officer Manukas, you testified earlier that you used tire marks such as this to make it form an opinion as to speed. Did you use those tire marks on the night in question to form your opinion?
We used tire marks previous to this picture before the vehicle exits the roadway. These marks are just a little bit easier to see because, well, you can see the gouges and scrapes and the grass that's being removed as the vehicle travels through that path.
State's Exhibit 51, which is our 2446548. What do you see there, sir?
This is just prior to this picture is Tanbark Way, and it's a curve, and this is there's tire marks coming off of the roadway. He actually strikes this culvert right here, which is the sewer grate, and travels along that path till he gets up into these trees here.
So this photograph, 51, actually precedes what the area that's depicted in States 51. Is that right?
That's correct. It's difficult to see on the screen, but right there, where my pointer is the picture we just showed of the 4 tire marks I indicated in the previous picture.
Sergeant Sweden testified earlier as to the culvert that was damaged during the crash. Is that depicted there?
Yeah, that would be right in this area here.
State's Exhibit number 52, which is our 2446308. Okay, sir. You mentioned that you saw the damage to the vehicle there at the scene. Can you describe there what you said?
This is where the vehicle came to rest. This is actually the rear of the vehicle, and what you see up top is the roof of the vehicle caused by the deformation from the impact with the tree that it struck.
State's Exhibit number 53, which is our 2446287. Yes, sir.
This is the actual driver's side of the vehicle. You can see how the roof had been lifted up and back from the impact that was caused. Just looking at the damage from the 2 pictures, you can see the severity of the damage, indicating and qualifying our speed at a high rate of speed at impact.
There appears to be a sheet over the driver's side door. Was that where Mr. Taylor was located?
That is.
Okay. Any other individuals located around that vehicle, sir, besides Mr. Taylor?
There was nobody else.
Your speed estimate as to 89 miles per hour before impact, and then, and I apologize, your speed at impact?
63, I believe.
63. Was that damage consistent with that type of collision?
Honestly, looking at the damage, I expected to have a higher speed than that.
State's Exhibit number 54, which is 2446590. What do you see there, sir?
This right here is the impact area from the driver's side of Mr. Taylor's vehicle with the tree. And then you can see how the vehicle continued to travel along this path until coming to rest back on the roadway.
I'm sorry, State's Exhibit 55, 244661. What do you see there, sir?
This is just a close-up view of the tree that was struck. You can see that the bark had been ripped from the tree and removed from the impact that caused by Mr. Taylor's vehicle.
State's Exhibit 56, 2446263.
This is just a frontal view of the BMW, Mr. Taylor's vehicle. You can see, even though it didn't get struck in the front, you can see how the impact and the energy displaced from striking the tree had dislodged some of the front, and you can see how the glass and the roof are bent back here, and there is a field of fluid trail on the hood of the vehicle from the impact.
Finally, State's Exhibit number 57, which is 2446275. What do you see there, Officer Manukas?
Again, this is just a different angle of the driver's side of Mr. Taylor's vehicle, and you can see how the vehicle had been, the sides of the vehicle had kind of been ripped off from the impact and the cause from the tree when it struck it.
Officer, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Officer Manukas, when you were out there that night, did you actually go through the vehicle or search the vehicle, sir?
Honestly, we did a quick cursory search of the vehicle. On all fatality vehicle collisions, if the driver or the deceased remains in the vehicle, we leave the deceased where he's at in this case until the medical examiner's office releases the body and somebody comes to remove it. We want to leave all evidence intact. So after he was removed from the vehicle and transported to the medical examiner's office, we did a cursory search, just a quick search, and what we normally do is go back during daytime hours when we can see a little bit better and change out of our good uniform, so to say, and be able to dig through our cars a little bit to look for more evidence.
When you did the cursory search there the night or morning in question, did you find any alcohol or drugs or anything of note in that vehicle upon the first search?
No, sir, there was nothing located.
Did you smell any alcohol or marijuana or any other odors about the vehicle when you were inspecting it?
Nothing out of the vehicle. When Mr. Taylor was removed from the vehicle, you could smell an odor of alcohol coming from his person.
At some point later, did you go back and do the full search of the vehicle as you were describing a moment ago?
We did.
When did you do that, Officer Manukas?
It was July 2nd, I believe, is when we went back. I don't have the exact date, but it was the same date that I believe we went back with Mr. Taylor.
And I believe, is that also the date you went and took the field measurements
That is correct, sir.
that you described in the daytime hours? When you went and did the more thorough search, Officer Manukas, did you find anything at that point?
No, there was nothing else located in the vehicle.
How about Mr. Taylor's phone, JT Taylor's phone? Did you find that at any point?
Yeah, that was provided before I had a chance to go back to do a more thorough search of the vehicle. Mr. Taylor had gone to the vehicle and located his cell phone.
And when you say Mr. Taylor, you're referring to Trooper Taylor?
That is correct.
Trooper Greg Taylor. Your second prong of this investigation, we talked about the crash itself, but said you also kind of looked into the alcohol involvement with this case. Can you describe for the jury what steps you took and who you took steps with to follow up on the alcohol involvement in this case?
We always like to set a timeline of events to figure out what occurred. Some of our job is to give answers to the family more than necessarily having charges. So in this case, we learned that JT Taylor was coming from 904 Vance Street. So I made sure that an officer went by to follow up with that. When we when we learned that there was alcohol consumption at that residence previous in that day, we decided that we would follow up with pretty much everybody. We'd follow up with the Matthews family. We'd follow up with the catering company and determine what exactly happened that may have helped and contributed to this collision. At this point in the evening, there was not a whole lot that we could do. I believe I was out at the scene till approximately 3 a.m. And then, unfortunately, that night I responded to a second fatality collision, so I had to leave that scene, and I forwarded the information on the impairment side to Sergeant Hooland, who had a little bit more time to be able to follow up during the week on the impairment side of this investigation.
And did you assist throughout this assist Sergeant Hooland with this investigation throughout the time that it was being, before charges were drawn, I guess I should say?
Yeah, absolutely. We worked pretty closely together on this. Sergeant Hooland was able to divide himself, I guess, with the impairment side of it and go out and interview more people than I was capable of because I was working. On this 24-hour period, there were 3 fatality collisions that I was involved in. So he was able to follow up a little bit easier than I was. And
Officer Manukas, one of your responsibilities in regards to this investigation, was it gathering the photographs that we've described earlier?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But tell us a little bit about how you went about obtaining those photographs.
We had the idea of trying to determine who the photographer for the wedding was, and Sergeant Hooland and I kind of sat down together to try to indicate how to figure that out. I believe through Facebook and some other means, we determined who the photographer may have been, and Sergeant Hooland was actually in contact with attorney Roger Smith and forwarded the information to him, and he verified who the actual photographers were. After we learned who the photographers were, we just picked up the phone and called them and said we would like to get a copy of their pictures, and they said come on over.
And were they polite and cooperative with you in providing those photographs?
They were out of Sanford, North Carolina. So Sergeant Hooland and I drove to Sanford, and they downloaded the photographs for us.
And when you say you downloaded those photographs, how were the photographs downloaded on for your use as the Raleigh Police Department?
I provided the photographers with a external hard drive and handed it to them, and they plugged it into their computer and transferred all the pictures.
And Officer Manukas, did you have the opportunity to review those photographs?
I did.
Approximately how many photographs were there, sir?
A lot. Probably, I think there was over 2,000 different photographs that we looked through.
And when you downloaded those photographs, and kind of similar to what we've seen here on the screen throughout this trial, when you click on a photograph, are you able to see when that photograph was generated?
Apparently you are. I just actually realized that today as we flipped through the pictures, and Mr. Miles has mentioned it.
And when you looked through your download, were you able to see, hey, this is when photograph 2N36482 was taken?
Yes.
May I approach the witness front?
You may.
Okay, so what's that being offered to show? It's not.
The day that you saw the list of all the photographs that were taken and downloaded on your flash drive, do you recognize that those not all the photographs, but the numbers as they appear there on that spreadsheet?
This looks to be a thumbnail pictures and dates and that the photos were taken.
And so, for example, using State's Exhibit number 16, there's a number that I've been calling out of 2N36966.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so when I say State's Exhibit number 16, 2N36966, will that reflect what time the photograph was taken?
I believe it does. If the camera is accurate with the date and time, I believe it should. Yes, sir.
And using State's Exhibit 16, 2N36966, what is the timestamp that's placed on that photograph?
The timestamp is 8:36 p.m.
And so when you received these photographs from the Lawrences, they didn't have a State's Exhibit 16, 17 listed on them. It was in that 2N36966 type number.
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask to introduce State's Exhibit 58 into evidence.
State's Exhibit 58 is admitted in evidence.
Officer Manukas, Sergeant Hoolan did some interviews in this case with other individuals. Did you personally interview any of the defendants or witnesses separate apart from Sergeant Hoolan?
No, sir, I did not.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor. Thank you, Officer Manukas. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Officer Manukas.
Afternoon, sir.
So if I understand your testimony correctly, you and Sergeant Hoolan weren't aware of the timestamps until today?
That is absolutely correct.
So when you got the photographs, that was on, it was August 5th when you downloaded them?
Yes, sir, August 5th.
So, and you indicated that it was well over 2,000 photographs, correct?
That is correct.
Did you and Sergeant Hoolan go through the photographs?
I went through the photographs, and I think I pointed specific photographs out to Sergeant Hoolan.
And so, but because you didn't know the timestamps, you couldn't put them in chronological order. Is that correct?
I think they come in chronological order, so as I hit the next button, the next arrow key, it goes to the next picture. So I believe they are actually listed in chronological order as I go picture to picture.
Well, there was two photographers, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and so they were taking pictures simultaneously. So, was there two sets of pictures?
They're downloaded in one file, but I believe if you look at them, the first one camera was 2N3, and the other one was labeled with 3N something else. Without looking at it, I couldn't tell you the exact numbers. So I think the first sequential order was from the one camera, and then it was in sequential order from the second camera.
Why did at that point on August 5th, it had been a while since the accident on June 28th. Why so long to get up with the photographers?
It took us a while to figure out who they were. It took us a while to figure out what our next step in the investigation would be.
And some of that may have had to do with vacations and whatnot that happened during the summer with people being out. Was that part of it?
We have I guess, summers. I think Sergeant Hoolan was out of town for a week. I was teaching a class for 2 weeks. I don't know the exact time dates without having my calendar or his in front of me.
You also downloaded the information from JT Taylor's phone, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you got a search warrant for that phone, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so all the information that was on that phone, all the data was downloaded for an analysis, a computer analysis, correct?
No, that is correct.
And was a report generated from that phone?
There was.
Did you review the report, or was it given to Sergeant Hoolan, or do you know?
I reviewed the report.
And that particular report included all kinds of different messages between the owner of the phone, J.T. Taylor, and different individuals that were identified during the course of your investigation. Is that true?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So the report included, or the phone had information that was related to Anna Ergish's number.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And
I'm going to object that at this point you need to be heard, but at this point we're offering evidence.
Approach. Questions withdrawn?
withdraw the question. Do you have your supplement with you, Officer Manukas?
I do, sir.
Turn your attention to page 2 of your supplement. Was there information that you received through Sergeant Sweden and the Taylors concerning information that was important to figuring out where JT had come from? That
Yes.
is, if you look at the second line, Mr. Taylor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. They say Mr. Taylor stated that his wife and he received a text message from their son asking him to come pick him up.
That's correct.
Okay. And then the next line of report, they assumed it was because he had been drinking.
That is correct.
And Mr. Taylor further stated that when he arrived at the house, being 904 Vance Street, that his son had already left.
That is correct.
Other than the photographs and the phone during the course of, after your crash investigation was over, did you have any other investigative role in the underage drinking?
Sergeant Hoolen and I worked together on it to determine charges and met with the DA's office and the family on several occasions.
That was to, and did the Taylors express that they wanted the Matthews charged criminally?
The Taylors expressed that they wanted anybody who was responsible to be charged, whether it be the Matthews or anybody else we determined.
And so, at the time did you issue charges kind of at the same time for the different individuals at the end of the investigation?
For the defendants?
Right.
Yes, sir. We worked that out. I believe Sergeant Hoolen worked that out with you and Mr. Smith.
Well, actually, I don't think I was involved at that time. But Mr. Smith communicated with you about turning Thomas Matthews in.
Objection to other legal proceedings.
Sustained.
Were the Matthews family cooperative during the investigation, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, you'd have to ask Sergeant Hoolen. He interacted with them. I've never met the Matthews family until today, or this week, excuse me.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor. Thank you, Officer Williams.
You may step down.
Thank you, sir.
Next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time the state would call on Sergeant Hoolen to stand.
Sir, if you would, please place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Sergeant Hoolen, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Will you please state your name for the record?
My name is Sean Hoolen.
And Sergeant Hoolen, how are you employed?
I'm a sergeant with the Raleigh Police Department.
How long have you been with the Raleigh Police Department?
In September, it'll be 18 years.
I called you Sergeant Hoolen. Can you tell us a little bit about your duties and responsibilities as a sergeant with the Raleigh Police Department?
Well, for the last 2.5, going on 3 years, I've been a sergeant of the Crash Reconstruction Unit, and I've been a sergeant for going on 5 years. My job with my squad of 3 officers is to make sure that their payroll is up to complete, make sure that state mandated training is up to date, assist them in any cases that they may need me at, any administrative duties.
And Sergeant Houlihan, in regards to this case, how did you become involved with the Matthews case?
Well, I get called for every single time one of my officers one of the 3 officers on my squad is on call 24 hours. They swap up the phone based on their schedules. I get called every single time they get called out. So I got called about this crash, but unfortunately, at that time, I was unable to respond to it. So I got involved with it on Monday, June the 30th, 2014.
And Sergeant Houlihan, I believe you can testify that as part of your duties and responsibilities as a sergeant is to assist the officers under you in any follow-up investigation.
Yes, sir.
Have you been a detective before with the Raleigh Police Department?
Yes, sir. I was a detective for 4 years, 2 of them in the General Detective Squad and 2 of them in the Robbery Squad.
And Sergeant Houlihan, based on your experiences, some of what the crash reconstruction unit does, similar to what other activities you do as a detective?
Yes, it's fair to say that the squad I have now does more work that would be like what a detective would do than what a patrol officer would do.
And in this case specifically, did it require some follow-up investigation, not only as to the crash that occurred, but explaining how and why it occurred?
Yes, it did.
What steps, or when you learned about the crash, you said you learned about it on Monday, is that right?
Well, I heard about it on June 28th. I got a lot more details on June the 30th.
On June 30th, when you began this investigation, what was the initial report that you got about this case?
What it would have done would be what's called a case summary, which would basically be about a 1-page summary that Manukas or whoever the crash reconstruction unit that responded that night would complete and send out to myself and then all lieutenants and captains of the Raleigh Police Department. Just to make them aware in case a citizen calls up with information, so at least a supervisor knows. We don't send it out to every single officer in the Raleigh Police Department. Then I would also pull up the case number and I'd read any supplements that have been completed at that time, either by Manukas or any of the patrol officers that were at the scene.
And regarding the crash itself, did you do any follow-up investigation with the crash itself?
With the crash itself, no.
And I know that's kind of a technical term. Officer Manukas talked about determining the speed of the vehicle and what caused the crash. Were you involved in that aspect of the crash?
Yes, I am not a crash reconstruction expert.
The second prong or second phase of this investigation, the alcohol phase, as I've kind of labeled it, if that's a fair assessment. How did you go about investigating that aspect of the case?
Well, the first thing I did was I spoke to the Taylors, and then I eventually spoke to Mrs. Matthews, and then the catering, I think everyone except for one caterer that was there that night. I spoke to all the kids that were teenagers that were involved in this crash, with the exception, all of them, over the next couple of days.
And why did you feel it was important to talk with all those individuals, Sergeant Wood?
Well, one of the things we like to do, has been discussed, is to make a timeline, to go back. And sometimes it's for criminal cases, sometimes it's just for the families they want to know. We try our best to give them whatever answers we can. And after reading some of the reports, or the early reports coming in, this was one of the cases where some additional background was going to be needed.
Who did you begin with talking with in regards to this investigation?
Lieutenant Tom Zak. On Monday I came in, and as Manukas mentioned, unfortunately there was a couple of other crashes that weekend that Manukas had a bad weekend. So I was looking at all of them throughout the week, and also as more and more supervisors, my supervisors come in, if they ask questions, I want to be able to give them answers. But early that morning, I came in at 7 o'clock in the morning. Sometime before 8, I started reading this case for sure.
And I'm sorry, I didn't ask that very well. In terms of when you started interviewing people that were involved in the case, who was the first person that you spoke with?
The first person that I spoke to was Mr. and Mrs. Taylor.
And what was the purpose of your conversation with them?
Well, I know that they had JT's phone, but also I think it's only fair that they meet a face of the police department. Manukas was doing other things. Actually, on that day he wasn't in because of all the call-outs he had that weekend. But I want to make sure, obviously the night in question for this crash or any other ones like this, there's a lot of things going through the family's head. I want to make sure that they have a contact person to contact if they have any questions, comments, or concerns.
And did you identify yourself to them as the lead investigator in this case, and kind of who to contact if decisions need to be made or if
They-
there's any updates?
They had Officer Manukas's card, which I recall had a cell phone number on it. I gave him mine as well. I believe Lieutenant Tomzak came out with me, and I believe he gave his card as well also. But did I say I'm the lead, or I'm sure I said I was the sergeant of the squad, Officer Manukas is the lead, but if he wants to call me, he can. I'll get him the answers.
Any other evidence that you gathered from the Taylors that day when you met with them?
We retrieved the cell phone and the password for the phone for their son, JT.
What did you do next, Sergeant Hulu?
The next step I did was I drove out to the Matthews residence.
What was the purpose of driving out to the Matthews residence?
Well, I'm still trying to put this all together. I just because they left the house, I don't know what the setup was. I don't know if there was if it was a dry wedding. I don't know if, I assumed it was catered, but I did not know that. So really just to find out more answers.
And what day did you get there to the Matthews residence?
On June the 30th.
And who, did you in fact meet with somebody there at the Matthews residence on June 30th?
Yes, I met with Mrs. Matthews. To the library of the house, which was described, a little library room right off the kitchen.
Oh, and that has been mentioned, Sergeant Hulu. Can you, and I believe we've shown a photograph of the inside of the house, so can you describe for us what the inside of the house looks like there around the kitchen?
Kitchen is very large, for lack of a better term, and just a little room has some books and I believe some leather couches in there, just a little side room that connects probably the kitchen to like the front of the house.
And we've obviously seen a lot of photographs of the back of the residence there. How close to the back of the residence where you've seen pictures depicted of where the teenagers were hanging out was that library from that table?
My guess would be about 50 feet.
Using this courtroom?
Going through the kitchen and then out the doors.
Using this courtroom from where you said, about how far would that library be from?
Maybe to the back wall.
The kitchen area, there's also been talk of a basement. Did you notice a basement while you were there with Miss Matthews on that trip?
Miss Matthews showed me it, yes.
Where was that basement in relation to the kitchen, Sergeant Hoyle?
It was right off the kitchen.
There was testimony about an island there in the kitchen where the cake was and all. How close was the entrance to the basement to that island?
Pretty close. I want to say it was right behind it.
Your conversation that you had there with Mrs. Matthews, tell us about that, sir.
Well, obviously I explained who I was and what I was doing, and I just was trying to get more answers of what happened.
What was Miss Matthews' statement to you that night?
Well,
That day.
I learned that the caterer was Parasite Restaurant in Durham, North Carolina. She did not remember the name of the DJ, and she mentioned that the wine had come from a wine shop on Wade Avenue that was owned by either the groom or the groom's family. I'm not 100% sure.
So she indicated to you at that point that the family or the groom supplied the wine for the wedding?
Correct.
Or the alcoholic beverages for the wedding?
Yes, sir.
What else did she tell you there, sir?
She advised that the restaurant also provided 5 to 7 service. She wasn't sure the exact time. That later on that night, she was not sure the exact time. She was in her pajamas. She heard some knocking on the back door and looked out and saw a police officer with a flashlight. She went down to him, and he explained that he was investigating a sound complaint, and she told him that there was a wedding earlier in the evening.
Let me back up just a second, Sergeant Hoolan. When you got this case report, Officer Wall was the individual, we've heard from him, that did the initial investigation there. Had you reviewed Officer Wall's report and spoken with him before going to the Matthews residence?
Before, no. Later on in that day, I did. But I did read the supplement that he filed that morning before I met with anybody.
So you read supplement, visited with Matthews, and later followed up with Officer Wall?
Yes.
All right, and is that why, well, tell us a little bit more about what Ms. Matthews said there.
I knew through reading Wall saying that there was a woman in the kitchen, and then there was a follow-up question of, who was the woman in the kitchen, and she said that there was no woman, it was her husband and her son in the house. And obviously I knew since then that that was proven false, so I asked her why Anna was not mentioned when the police officer was in the house.
What was Ms. Matthews' response to that?
Her response was that he was asking who he could have seen in the kitchen, and since Anna was downstairs in the basement, he could not have seen Anna in the kitchen. She explained that she thought it was more asking who was in the kitchen, not who was in the house.
Did you follow up with that, Sergeant Hoolan, and ask specifically why she didn't say anyone else was in the house when that was the question posed to her?
I did not.
And was there a reason why you decided not to follow up with her at that point?
I'm still at the fact-gathering process. I didn't know all the details now. I'm just trying to figure out the basics.
What else did Ms. Matthews say to you when you interviewed her there at her home?
She advised she was hosting her daughter's wedding. She remembers seeing all of her friends, but didn't spend much time with them. She was just making sure that things were running smoothly throughout the day or evening.
So at that point, she does acknowledge that she knows that her friends were there.
Correct.
Or his friends were there, excuse me.
Correct.
Did she name off the names of the friends that were there at that time, Sergeant?
I don't believe I asked her to, so no.
At that point in your investigation, did you know who all the teenagers were at the wedding?
Actually, I did. I misspoke before. I spoke to one of the girls before going to that house.
Which girl was that?
Anna.
Mary Anna.
Mary Anna Ergish.
All right. And we'll go back and talk with what you talked with her about in a moment. We'll continue with Mrs. Matthews. What else did Mrs. Matthews tell you there?
She remembered early in the evening JT approached her and said what a good time he was having and thanked her for inviting him. And she remembered asking if he was leaving, and he said to her no, that he was spending the night.
Did she see Mr. JT later on in the night?
Later on in the night, she said she saw JT talking to her parents, and she described him as a little slumped over while talking to them. She thought he may have drank something, but thought it was more fatigue. And at that time, she walked him into the house and brought him into the small, quiet room off the kitchen. She told him to sit down in this cool and quiet place, which would have been the library where we were sitting in.
And did she verify that for you? Said this is where I brought him, the same place we're sitting right now?
Yes.
At that point, what did Mrs. Matthews tell you that she did with JT when she left him in that room?
A few minutes later, she advised that she came back into that room, and JT was not there. She advised to me that she asked her son, Thomas, who was not sure where he was, and then that somebody in the kitchen said that he left with a bald guy. She assumed that it was her father who had, JT's father who had short hair.
kind of skip ahead a little bit to, did you interview Mr. Brian Johnson, who I believe testified here earlier today? Yes, it's been a long day. He testified here earlier today. Did you
I did.
interview him as well?
Yes.
Okay, and based on your conversation with him, with Mr. Johnson, was that the same library book room that he found JT in when he described him as being intoxicated?
It would appear to me that, yes, that was the same room.
So in talking with both sets of those individuals, it appears that was where JT was last seen.
Yes, sir.
What else was told to you by Mrs. Matthews that night?
Several hours later, she saw that she had a missed message while she was getting ready for bed, or up in her room, I'm not sure exactly. It was a message from Carrie Taylor, and she called her back.
And what did she learn at that point?
She said that she learned at that time that JT was dead.
Did Mrs. Matthews tell you in what order that she learned about or spoke with Carrie Taylor, and in regards to when the Raleigh police officer showed up there at the door?
No, she could not. She could not recall the order of when the police came about the party call, when EMS came for Anna, or when she found out about the fatal crash for JT. She thought she found out about the death before the first officer and EMS called. But yes, that's just, so she could not.
She couldn't tell you which order.
She could not.
Sergeant Houlihan, regarding Anna, at any point, did you ask her why she or her husband didn't inform Officer Wall, that officer that came to the house twice, why they didn't inform him about Anna being in the basement?
I did not.
You didn't ask her about that?
No.
Did she?
Well, other than the first conversation of, there was some confusion of, according to her, that he was asking who he could have seen in the kitchen rather than who was in the house.
So she never gave you an explanation for that?
Correct.
Anything else that Mrs. Matthews told you while you were there meeting with her on June 30th?
Well, I did learn about, she told me about Natalie Freeman, who got sick and was texting her father to come get her. At one time, she thought I was being tough on her. I think she said interrogating her. I personally did not think that was the case in any way, but other than that, no.
Natalie, what did she tell you about her interaction with Natalie?
She advised that Natalie Freeman got sick, and she helped her with texting her father to come and get her.
And when she got sick, Sergeant Houlihan, did Mrs. Matthews tell you why Natalie got sick?
We did not go over that.
And at that point in the investigation, Sergeant Houlihan, did you have any conversation with her about her knowledge as to whether underage individuals were drinking there at her house?
We did not.
And why at that point did you decide not to go into that discussion with her?
Well, right now, I'm still just trying to get basic information. I don't know all the stuff that's going to come out, and I just want to keep the door open to talk to her. I'm not sure of all the details. I'm just trying to get a little bit at a time.
Any other conversation you had with Miss Matthews there at the house that day?
No, other than, no.
You mentioned a moment ago that you'd spoken with Anna Ergish prior to going to the Matthews house.
Correct.
Can you tell us about that, sir?
Well, Anna Ergish was at that time the only person that I knew for sure was at the wedding, based on also Wall's supplements.
And what do you mean by that? How did you know that Anna was there?
Well, I knew that also Wall was there, and EMS had responded, and that, so I knew that Anna was at the wedding.
Okay.
Based on reading also Wall's statements. So I went over to, at that time, her residence.
Well, what did Anna tell you at that point? think I backed you up to page 3 or something. I apologize.
Well, one of the first things I did when I told her is that I understood that she was cited for alcohol consumption by another officer, and I was not going to ask her questions about that case. I explained to her that if any of the stuff he has, she mentions, I would personally tell the DA that it shouldn't be used in her criminal case.
And did she agree to speak with you after that?
She did.
What did she tell you, Sergeant Woodward?
She advised that she drove herself to the wedding and arrived around 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. The ceremony was to start at 7:30. The wedding was at Thomas Matthews' house, and that other Ravenscroft kids, which she gave the name of Jonathan Taylor and Josh McCoy were also going to be at the wedding. And she advised that Natalie Freeman, who went to Cardinal Gibbons High School, was also going to be at the wedding. She estimated 40 to 50 people were at the wedding.
What else did she tell you?
She advised that there was food, and she was not sure if the family made the food or if it was catered. She was pretty confident that she saw 2 or 3 people that appeared to be helping serving food and alcohol. She advised that the bar set up outside in front and in the back of the house. She advised that all were drinking wine at the table in plain view and that they were not hiding it.
And when she says that she advised all were drinking wine at the table, who was she referring to at that point, Sergeant Woodward, based on your conversation?
She advised Natalie Freeman, herself, Jonathan Taylor, and Thomas Matthews. She did mention, with the exception of Josh McCoy.
All right.
She did tell me at that time that there was no other drinking other than the wine that evening, and she denied any drug use.
And Sergeant Houlihan, as the lead investigator in this case, have you spoken with multiple individuals about possible drug use separate and apart from the alcohol consumption?
Yes.
And during the course of your investigation, have you found any evidence that anything but the alcohol was consumed by the teenagers?
With the exception of the one statement that Mr. Johnson said when he saw JT in the library, that he said drunk and stoned or both. I have not found any other evidence to support that.
Either through witness statements or through any physical evidence that you may have seen or looked through.
That is correct.
All right. And what else did Ms. Ergish tell you there?
She advised that she went up to the bar and picked up wine. She advised the bartenders had several glasses of wine that was pre-poured.
And regarding that, Sergeant Houlihan, did she ever waver from that sometimes it was handed to her, sometimes it was pre-poured? What was her exact statement when she talked to you originally?
That remained consistent. She said that she went up to the bar and picked up the wine. She advised the bartenders had several glasses pre-poured.
One of the things that you mentioned as part of your investigation is to maybe help a family understand why something happened. Did you talk to Anna about why JT left there that night?
Yes. When I met with the Taylor family that day, one of the questions, and it's a common question, is why? Why did JT leave? This one has a little bit more with the texting just prior to it. And
you're talking about the texting.
The texting to Mr. Taylor, or I guess Mrs. Taylor, and I wanted to try to, if I could, give them an answer. I wanted to give it to them, A, for them, and B, also for our case.
And during the course of your investigation against her and talking with Ms. Ergish, and we'll get specifically to her in a second, but there's everybody that you've talked to, have you been able to, answer that question of why he decided to leave, if an event caused him to leave?
I have never been able to figure out exactly why he left.
And what, specifically, in talking to Ms. Ergish, what did she tell you?
She did not know why JT left.
What did she say about him?
She advised that he was very intoxicated, and she didn't find out till the next day until the crash. She stated that JT was stumbling and was obviously intoxicated. She also said that since the crash, nobody understood why it left. And there was some rumor about a bald guy that came to pick up JT, and I asked her about that, and she said she never heard that rumor.
And in talking about that bald guy, Trooper Taylor has a close haircut. Did she say it was his father, or that picked him up, or was out there, or did she make any mention of him whatsoever?
No, she had no idea about any rumor about the bald guy. I think it was brought up at the Taylor residence based on conversation that they had, but she did not hear anything about a bald guy or anybody coming to pick him up.
And was that the conclusion of your conversation with Miss Ergish, Sergeant Hoolan?
Yes.
Okay. After you finished that conversation, what was your impression of Mrs. Ergish's complete truthfulness with you?
Objection.
Sustained.
What did you, after you left there, did you do any follow-up investigation regarding Miss Ergish's statements to you?
I did.
Okay. What did you go back and talk to Miss Ergish at a later date?
I did,
Why did you do that?
because I didn't think then, and then I was supported my feelings then that she was not being completely truthful.
Objection and motion to strike.
Motion to strike is allowed. Disregard, members of the jury, if you will. Not if you will, but do disregard this witness's opinion as to the veracity of Anna Ergish at the time she talked to him.
When did you go see Anna Ergish a second time?
On July the 1st.
And what information did Anna tell you at that point that she did not tell you during the first meeting?
She advised that they had all got to the house with the exception of Josh McCoy at about 6:30, and that they went to the ABC store in Cameron Village, and that Thomas went in and bought a bottle of Jack Daniel's honey, and that he was not asked for identification.
And did you ask Miss Ergish why she didn't tell you that during this first meeting on June 30th?
I don't know if I think she was afraid.
What did she tell you?
I don't remember if there was a reason of why she told me. She did not tell me that the first time.
When you confronted her with that information the second time, did she in fact tell you?
Yes.
All right. Sergeant Hoolan, after you spoke with Miss Ergish, is that the point where you went over to the Matthews residence?
The first time,
The
yes.
first time, yes, sir. And
Correct.
then after you went to I know I got us out of order just a little bit, but after you went to the Matthews residence, where did you go from there?
I think I'll stop you for the day.
Yes, sir.
You may step down, sir. Members of the jury will stop for today. Resume tomorrow morning at 9:30. Please remember to follow all of my early instructions, of course including do not talk or communicate about this case with anyone, not even among yourselves, until you've been instructed to begin deliberations. If anyone does talk with you or attempts to do so in your presence, report that to me promptly. Do not form the opinion as to whether the defendant, either defendant is guilty or not guilty until I instruct you to begin deliberations. Do not have any contact or communication outside of open court with any of the parties, lawyers, or witnesses. Do not visit any of the scenes or the places which may be the subject matter of this trial. Do not undertake any independent inquiry, research, or investigation in anything related to this case. Remember those and all other instructions. Return tomorrow morning at 9:30, ready to resume. You're excused now. Everyone else remain in place. Anything before we recess?
Good, thank you.
9:30, Sheriff.
Critical Center
9:30 tomorrow morning, y'all stay safe.